Well, wire management is neither fun nor glamorous, but it is part of every PV installation. So we need to talk about it a bit, and we'll do that to wrap up this presentation. Array wire management. You have to realize that what we do is a little bit unique in terms of running single conductor cable or sometimes multi-conductor DG. It's not, kind of like in free air. It's behind an array. It's, protected. It's running along a structure, but it's not the way we usually do things, especially inside of buildings. And this can present a hazard, especially when you couple that with the fact that these wires are outside, exposed to the elements, exposed to other things that can cause damage. So this is really a critical part of safe, reliable, long-lasting installations, and it can be difficult to do. It can be really difficult to execute effectively. So fundamentally what we're trying to do is protect against physical damage. And there's all kinds of things. The roof itself can create damage, right? Screws in face fastened metal roofs or rough abrasive asphalt shingles. Then certainly when we throw in things like the weather, ice for instance, which can grab onto wires and pull on them as the ice moves down the roof, potentially damaging them. Rodents love to chew on stuff. Any kind of chafing point or sharp edge up there, we need to be aware of those and be routing and managing our wires so that they're not going to create damage. Important to remember, it might not be a problem on day 1 or even day 100 or 300, but down the road, over time, with some movement and expansion and contraction and wind and whatnot going on, damage can occur and it can result in serious hazards. We also want to allow for that thermal movement I just mentioned, expansion and contraction. Right? If a wire is pulled tight when it's installed in the middle of the summer, what's going to happen in the winter when that thing contracts? Well, it may get scraped against a sharp edge, or it might even get pulled out of the box or termination that it's running into. So we want to keep that in mind and allow room for wire to move over time as well. And hey, the code calls this out. It says, equipment shall be installed in a neat and workperson-like manner. It should be pleasing and easy on the eyes to look at. When I do inspections on systems, I love to see wire management that's done, replicated the same over and over and over again. Well, as long as it was done well. So that's a strategy I recommend, is figure out how we're going to do our wire management. And then once we've decided on that way and like, hey, this looks like it's going to work well for this particular rack and these modules and these leads and whatnot, do it over and over again that same way. That can allow you to do things like stage. Maybe on the ground, we can dress up our module leads a little bit and do some of the wire management there before we're on the roof and where it's a little more of a struggle. And it can also help us really inform exactly how much material we're going to need to properly do this. So a neat and workperson-like manner. It goes a long way to have an array that looks good. It makes you feel good, it makes the owner feel good, and it makes the inspector feel good as well. Some of the considerations when it comes to array wire management. Hey, there's a good image on the slide of the difficulties of doing this on a roof, getting behind those modules on a ballasted roof-mounted system there. Sure, it's a lot easier on the ground, but on the ground, there might be tens of thousands of modules, right? So it's difficult. It can be tedious. We want to have a plan and a strategy, and we want to use materials that are going to work and last for a good long time. So use something that's suitable for the environment and built for the purpose. You got to realize if something's drooping on day 1, it ain't going to fix itself. It's only going to get worse over time, and that can create a hazard. So we recommend using materials that are going to last for the lifetime of the system. Or if you're using things like zip ties that can have a very long life, but probably not 30 years, you will need to realize that those are going to have to be part of an O&M plan. So we can make decisions based on how difficult this may be to do or what the system type is. A roof-mounted system, modules flush against the roof where if something fails and it's dangling, it's a real pain to fix. Yeah, I want to use something up there where I don't have to worry about it. It's going to last for the life of the system. A ground-mounted system, a large ground mount where maybe there's routine maintenance procedures going on at regular intervals, we could decide that, yeah, we'll use less expensive, shorter-lived materials, but we know that part of our O&M is going to be replacing them as they fail after some period of time. Keeping an eye on that kind of stuff. So it's a strategy, but we want to make sure that we have a good one to start off with. Behind the modules, there's all kinds of things we can do. Some racking has integrated wireways, particularly ground-mounted systems where there's a lip or some other type of part of the rack that we can use to hold wiring with. So we see that on some roof-mounted systems as well. We use all kinds of clips, cable ties, zip ties, whatever you want to call them. not the clear ones. The black ones are better. There's even better ones than that out there as well that are going to give you a longer lasting product. And then things like J-hooks for bundles of wires, cable tray, we've talked about that and seen some examples of that as well. They all have their place. No one is perfect for all applications, but you want to make sure you're picking the right thing for the particular installation. When it comes to entering enclosures like combiner boxes, want to pay attention to like conduit location so that it's not coming in above energized parts where if moisture comes in, it's going to drip on an energized bus bar. Think about where other equipment is connecting so that we don't take up the space we need for other stuff to get in there. And then also think about keeping that water out and letting it out if it gets in. This is things like duct sealant to seal up conduit, both ends of it, so moisture can't get in, and if it does, it doesn't get out the other end into the enclosure. We might add weep holes at low points in conduit systems so that the water that gets in them will work its way out rather than working its way into the wiring compartment of an inverter, for instance. You have to realize conduit isn't made to keep water in like, plumbing piping is. It's made to protect wires. Most conduit systems out there are going to have some moisture in them. Some of them are completely full of water. The conductors are wet rated. That's okay. So want to realize that water in, sometimes we need to give it a way to get out. We want to do everything we can to keep it from getting in there, but we also don't want to, if it does get in, allow it to do more damage than it otherwise would. All right, we'll look at some examples here of good and bad. These are what we call good array wire management. We're using listed products. You can see cable clips down on the bottom there. They come in various sizes for different conductor types, PV wire versus USE2 RHW2. They come in options for right angles when they clip to the module frame or to the racking. They may hold multiple conductors, all kinds of options out there these days. And you can see some of those effectively deployed in the images here. We've got some clips here on these wires within 12 inches within 24 inches as required by the code. Things look nice and clean here. It looks like it's been replicated multiple times. Here we've got, this is a microinverter system. I don't see a single wire dangling. That's awesome. We know that when we have module level power electronics, we got more wiring on the roof, more conductors to deal with. This looks nice and clean. And you also want to keep in mind, hey, those cable clips that we're using on the DC side, you can get ones that fit the AC wire that may be attaching to a microinverter. So use the stuff that's going to work for the system you're putting in. Another example of a long-lasting product would be this plastic-coated metal cable that crimps. Right, so it's got a crimp on it here. I can crimp it around stuff, and that's going to last for the life of the system. Lots of applications for using these. Do they cost more than zip ties? Yeah. Do they need to be replaced? No. Does a zip tie? Probably at some point. Now, one issue I have seen with these is if they get pulled too tight around a bundle of wire, this one's hitting the edge of the rack here, probably not going to be a problem. But that inner part of the crimp can be a little sharp. If you pull it too tight against wire, that can create problems over time as well. So lots of good examples of doing it right here. And I bet you the people that were putting this one in, this is an interesting rack and that it flips up for easy wire management. You're lucky if you get that, not too often. But see how everything's really nice and clean and done over and over again the same way? They had a plan. They had the right components and parts and pieces to execute it. And it looks like things turned out really well. This one says good. I'm going to call this one good with some issues. Maybe these, instead of green boxes, green for good, these should maybe be orange boxes around here. Some things I like, some things I don't like. What do you think about these? What do you think here? Well, we talked about this one on the right already. I like the clips, right? They're looking good spacing. Things are nice and clean. We don't have any stress here. The wire's not bent too tight. We talked about how I don't like this connector being exposed to this gap between the modules. Now, it tends to want to work that way, right? You got two equal lengths of wire. They meet in the middle at the edge of the module. That's where the connector is. There it sits. Now I look at this and I see ground mounted table here, probably maybe part of a big system. There may be thousands of these connectors sitting in this in the sun like this. I'd much rather have those tucked up underneath one or the other. So a good job, but some room for improvement, as is often the case. Over here, we've got an older system. You can see my white conductors, which indicates that. We've got a combiner box. I see labeling, cable tray. We've got some zip ties here, but the cable tray is going to support that. Need to secure it to the cable tray as well. Things look pretty good in here. What do I not like about this one? Yeah, it's that conduit coming in, right? Right above the fuse holders in the bus bar. We could have moisture come in, and now we've got some problems going on. Well, that conduit should be sealed up, duct seal. It's either a foam or a putty to keep moisture from getting in, and if it does get in there, keep it from getting out into the enclosure. That's not foolproof. The conduit is kind of bent there so that it's angled up towards the back of the module. It's got a lot of overhang. It might not be subject to a lot of moisture getting in there. I would much prefer this to come down the side, penetrate the box here, underneath all of the energized parts, and then we come up to it as wherever we need to land those wires. Probably a little more expensive because we're going to need that fitting to come in the side, a longer piece of conduit, whatnot, but likely more reliable in the long term. One thing I do want to mention, you can see the gasket on the lid of that combiner box, the door there. That indicates that this is a NEMA 4 enclosure meant to keep water out. So the problem is if water does get in, it can't get back out. This doesn't have a hole in it for that to drain. So if you get water in there, it can, the condensation can cause corrosion and create issues. So I'm not sure that this is totally set up for maximum success. There's some good looking stuff. There's also some stuff that I'd like to see improve. Now we get to the bad, the ugly, the red boxes. Poor array wire management. And it doesn't take anybody with any experience to realize that things are not done well here, right? We've got wires laying up against sharp edges, just spooled and yucky all over the place, super mess. I don't know what's happening right there. This is a disaster from the get-go, and it's only going to get worse, right? Zip ties are going to fail. Wires are going to fall out of there. They're going to be laying against this edge. They're going to move back and forth in the wind. They're going to suffer damage. Same thing with the bottom right picture there. There's no pride of workpersonship in that. It just looks like a mess, and it's going to lead to faults and failures. Over on the left, we've got to kind of own special problems going on here. It looks to me, this is a system that I've visited, and I don't know that this is the case, but it looks to me like these wires coming down into this enclosure here. Again, I don't love this coming through the top at all, but that's not what I really want to focus on. What do we got? We got some connectors here. Why would you do that? I can't really think of any good reason. Can't think of any good reason. But when I see these staples, these like fence staples pounded in here to hold those wires in place, they're up here too. And then I see burn marks on this wooden racking member, and I see new wires spliced in. I kind of think somebody had these energized, pounded in the staples, pounded them too far and shorted the wires out. Right? Shorted the wires out, had to splice in some new stuff. So just not good. Not good what's going on there. And likely there's other spots on this system where those staples have damaged the integrity of the insulation, and eventually it's going to lead to a failure. More examples of poor array wire management. We've got single conductor cable running across the roof. We've got roof penetrations that aren't flashed. This is a big no-no. It's going to catch ice and vegetative material and all kinds of other stuff, and eventually going to lead to failures. Looks like they did an okay job down here. I don't know what they were thinking up on the roof. This is, in my mind, not within the array. It's in open air, and this is going to lead to premature failures. Here we've got, well, this is just a flat-out code violation, right? Single conductor cable. It's not within the array. It's within the attic. You better not have put the array within the attic. You got some more major problems there then. But this is a major safety hazard. Single conductor cable pressed up against a nail plate. Those are often have some sharp edges on them, and a ground wire kind of pinning it up there. This is going to lead to a failure, a ground fault at the very least, possibly a fire. That makes me really, really, really nervous. And this does too. Maybe a little less so because, whatever, maybe somebody will see it and catch it and fix it. But connector laying in here within the array, to me, would say follow here and go up. I don't want this thing dangling on this whirlybird, which has metal edges on it, exposed so the connector is getting rained on and direct sunlight on it. This is just ugly. It's ugly. Besides the fact that it looks bad, it's going to create hazards down the road. More examples of poor array wire management. Oh, this one just drives me crazy. Single conductor cable just run under the ridge cap here. That is a big no-no. Definitely going to fail eventually. Here we've got, it's a little hard to see, but this is part of the rack, and we've got wires that are pulled up against this cut edge here. So that's going to result in a ground fault eventually. Likely same thing here. Conductors running into this racking piece, and that sharp edge is going to start grating on these wires and eventually lead to a failure. Here we've got just ugliness for one thing, but also this is not proper use for this conductor, and especially not when you strip the outer jacket and expose the inner wires. Again, going to be a failure. Maybe not right away, but eventually it's going to lead to a failure. Unfortunately, my computer is just loaded with these kinds of images. I've got them over and over and over again. Port array wire management, more dangling wires, sharp metal racking, dangling wires touching asphalt shingles. If we get snow or ice, it's going to pull these wires down, maybe against the edge of this foot here from the racking, which could cause some damage. Here we've got wires laying on bolts and parts up against these abrasive concrete blocks, all set to fail sometime down the road. Perhaps in just resulting in a loss of production, possibly resulting in something more dramatic or catastrophic. These last two down here I want to look at, this is where we're really stressing these terminations and the waterproof integrity of these particular conductors, right? This is a DC to DC converter mounted on the roof. You can see how tightly that wire's bent. Now we have the possibility of moisture getting inside the device depending on how this is sealed up. So we're stressing that. Same thing here. This is bent too tightly, causing stress on any kind of waterproofing here. And in both cases, we could even be stressing the termination inside that component itself. And if that fails, well, now you're down a module or a DC to DC converter or whatever it may be. So wire management, you got to do a good job. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I will definitely catch up with you again sometime soon. Thanks.